Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to another recruiting throwback video, this time taking a look at some 5-stars that might have made the wrong decision when it comes to their college choice. Now, this is just me going through some recruits. Most of these guys are recent players and just players that I think were not developed properly at colleges. Ended up getting picked later on in the draft because they chose schools that did not develop them properly. I understand there's, about 400 different things that go into making a college decision. You want to stay close to home. I totally get it when it comes to the kids, but these are examples to where these players you were just completely misused or undeveloped due to a poor college choice. So the first player, it's going to be Jaelan Phillips, who ended up going to UCLA. He was the number 1 overall player back in the class of, I want to say 2017, and you just take a look at his overall college stats at UCLA. Did deal with injuries, only 6 games as a true freshman, and then played in just 4 games as a sophomore. But you can see he transfers to Miami, 15 and a half tackles for loss, 8 sacks. That is legit production. Even as a true freshman at UCLA, he still had 7 tackles for loss. But I just think, he's from California. He wanted to stay home. We understand it. But if he would have gone to a school like Alabama, like Ohio State, this kid had all the physical tools to be, at minimum, a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. He did end up getting picked late in the first round, like with the 28th or 29th pick of the first round. So it wasn't like he was completely undeveloped, but this guy should have been a top 10 pick. And, his rookie year with the Miami Dolphins was really impressive. 8.5 sacks as a rookie is no joke. That's what he had in 2021. So this kid, I think if he goes to a school that develops defensive linemen a little bit better than UCLA and Miami, he could have been a top 10 pick. But he had a very good junior year at Miami and was selected late in the first round. The next player we're going to be talking about, Cam Akers, who was the number 3 overall player, number 2 running back, ranked extremely high for being a running back. He ends up going to Florida State. Horrible offensive line. He's from Mississippi. There was some early talk in his recruitment. Does he go to Bama? Fun fact, I actually think Cam Akers was committed to Alabama really early on in his recruitment, decommitted from there, and then he ends up at Florida State. Also, Ole Miss was a team that was in on him. He was from Mississippi as well as Ohio State, but he does go to Florida State and just plays behind an extremely bad offensive line. You can take a look at his overall numbers at Florida State. The thing that jumps out to me, the overall average. Averaging 5 yards per carry in college as a 5-star running back who was the number 3 overall player. It's not good. He did have 14 touchdowns as a senior. He had over 1,100 yards. He didn't end up getting picked, I believe, in the second round, I want to say. But this kid very easily could have had at least a better college career. You're talking about maybe a Heisman potential type running back, the way he caught the ball out of the backfield. But going to Florida State, I think, severely hurt him and his pro prospects when it comes to getting drafted. I don't want to, harp on Florida State too much, but also Marvin Wilson, the big defensive tackle, the number 6 overall player. I talked about him as one of my, biggest busts. This is a kid that ended up going from the 6th overall player in the country to being, unfortunately, undrafted. If this kid goes to Alabama as a big defensive tackle, like Georgia, he's developed a lot better. But I will say the thing with Marvin Wilson, I think the pandemic really screwed this kid. I feel like this is something that doesn't get talked about a lot. But a lot of these kids who were kind of fringe NFL prospects, or they were trying to have a really good senior season, only playing 8 games, 6 games, however many it was, he only ended up playing 6 games in that pandemic year. that's going to hurt your chances of getting drafted. And Marvin Wilson, going into his senior season, was thought of as maybe a first or a second round pick. His overall production at Florida State wasn't terrible for a defensive tackle. It wasn't anything special, but that senior season in 6 games, he just had 2 tackles for loss along with 1 sack and just 17 total tackles. That really hurt him. This is a big man who could have had a huge college career and could have very easily been a first-round pick. Instead, he's currently, I believe, not with an NFL team. I know he signed on as an undrafted free agent he is with a team. He's with the Philadelphia Eagles. Yes, I remember that. So he is with the Philadelphia Eagles, and I would love nothing more. I would love to see Marvin Wilson have a really good NFL career because I remember him when I was really following recruiting. He was a stud. He's a superstar, franchise-changing defensive tackle, and I think the pandemic really hurt him, unfortunately. And also, Florida State, just the lack of development, unfortunately hurt him. This is a guy that's a great example, Donovan Peoples-Jones. So Donovan Peoples-Jones, the number 12 overall player from Detroit, Michigan. He ends up committing to his home state school, number 1 overall receiver, and ends up, his numbers at Michigan, I was shocked at how bad his numbers were at Michigan. 277 yards, 600 yards, 438 yards, a total of 9 touchdowns. Those are crazy low numbers for the number 1 overall receiver, and we've seen him show out and play really well as a receiver in the NFL. He had a really good combine, but those overall numbers made him a late 5th, 6th round pick by the Cleveland Browns. This is a guy, if he goes to Ohio State or Alabama or Oklahoma, a school where he can show out at minimum, just based off of his potential and his athleticism and his running ability, this is at least a 2nd round pick, and unfortunately, he goes to Michigan, run-heavy offense, not the best quarterbacking, with Shea Patterson, it wasn't great. And there were just definitely better opportunities for him. Unfortunately, we understand you want to stay home. I totally get it. Go to Michigan. Go to the home state school where you're comfortable. But in terms of pro development, not the best choice. He ends up as a late round pick. Currently on the Browns, he's like a wide receiver 3. He's a legitimate player, but he could have been a lot higher of a pick if he went somewhere else. The next guy, Davis Mills. Very interesting. Davis Mills, the number 15 overall player and the number 1 overall quarterback from his class from the state of Georgia. He goes to Stanford. I'm not going to fault any kid for going to Stanford. The education is amazing. But something that's very interesting about Davis Mills. So Davis Mills, throughout his entire college career, in 3 seasons, he had 18 total touchdowns. In his first year in the NFL, he's had 16. So almost threw for more touchdowns in 1 year in the NFL than his entire college career. He did end up getting picked, I believe, in the 3rd round by the Houston Texans as kind of a higher upside quarterback project. Former 5-star with some tools, and he started most games his rookie year and didn't play that bad. Now, personally, I do not think Davis Mills is a future franchise quarterback in the NFL. I know a lot of people that are high on Davis Mills. For a rookie, 16 touchdowns, 10 interceptions on a bad team like Houston that's rebuilding, it's pretty good. But personally, I don't believe he's a future franchise quarterback. I think Houston drafts either CJ Stroud or Bryce Young next year. But either way, if Davis Mills goes to a team like Oklahoma, maybe a team that can develop quarterbacks a little bit more, put him in a better position to succeed. It's not like Stanford had the greatest skill position talent around Davis Mills. You could have easily seen Davis Mills as kind of a 1st round pick just based off of the potential he's shown in his first year in the NFL. So a former 5-star, I think, should have went somewhere else. The next one, it is Darnay Holmes, a really interesting athlete who ended up going to UCLA. Other schools that were involved in him, I specifically remember Ohio State being a team that was really involved with this kid. And could you imagine this kid, as a defensive back on that 2019 defense, along with Jeff Okudah, Chase Young. Ohio State the past 2 years has not been very good defensively, but that 2019 team, that was one of the best defenses they've ever had. And Darnay Holmes ends up staying home. He wants to play in the Rose Bowl, goes to UCLA. I think he was a bit underutilized in terms of his overall play at UCLA. He also dealt with a few injuries. I don't want to hate on UCLA. I'm just saying, Darnay Holmes and Jaelan Phillips as well, underutilized. He ends up getting drafted based off of upside, and he is currently with the New York Giants. He was a mid-round pick for the Giants. Spent only 3 years in college, I believe, before coming out. So I would say he's underutilized. The next guy, Demetris Robertson, who ended up going to Cal. Now, this, in California's defense, this kid might just be a bust. I think he is, unfortunately, he's a bust. Number 13th overall player, number 1 overall receiver from the state of Georgia. Very interesting. He chooses Cal. And his career really at California never got off the ground. He had actually a really nice true freshman season. 700 yards and 7 touchdowns on Cal as a true freshman. Dealt with injuries his sophomore season. Ends up transferring to Georgia, where he barely plays. And I believe the latest report on him, he might have tried to transfer to Auburn. It says he was with Auburn, and I just couldn't find any stats of him on Auburn, but I think he transferred to Auburn. I don't know. He's already played I feel like he's already used all of his eligibility. But either way, very interesting situation. This kid might just be a bust, but I feel like you're a receiver, you're from Georgia, and you go to Cal, you're starting off behind the 8 ball. That's what I feel when you do that, honestly. But I do love when 5-stars choose random schools like Cal. It is fun to see that. But he did end up transferring back to Georgia, where he didn't do much. Next guy, I think, that chose the wrong school. This one's very obvious. Christian Hackenberg. So Christian Hackenberg committed to Penn State when they were going through that whole Jerry Sandusky scandal. He wanted to stay committed. He wanted to stay true to Penn State. The problem is Penn State lost a bunch of their scholarships, so they had one of the worst offensive lines in all of college football, and I actually found this because I wanted to just highlight it. Christian Hackenberg's rushing stats in college, because sacks count as negative rushing yards in college, if you guys don't know. So at Penn State, he had a total of 208 rush attempts for negative 242 yards because their offensive line was so bad. He spent 3 years at Penn State before declaring for the draft and was picked in the 2nd round. Christian Hackenberg, honestly, had no business being a 2nd-round pick, but it's just he had no chance at Penn State. It's an unfortunate situation where they lost a bunch of scholarships. They had a horrible offensive line, and he got sacked consistently and beat up every single game at Penn State. Although I do salute him for being loyal to Penn State and staying committed. He was a very high-ranked recruit, the number 13 overall player in the nation. The next guy, it's going to be Stefon Diggs, who was the number 8 overall player in the entire country, the number 2 receiver from the state of Maryland. He decides to stay home. It's commendable. We like seeing that, but a lot of people don't know. They see Stefon Diggs as an NFL superstar. This kid was picked in the 5th round out of Maryland, and when Stefon Diggs, I remember Ohio State being very involved with this recruitment. I think if Stefon Diggs goes to Ohio State, he puts up a little bit better numbers. He gets more eyeballs on him. He's maybe a 2nd or a 3rd round pick. This is a former 5-star top 10 overall player we're talking about. Stefon Diggs had no business falling all the way to the 5th round of the NFL draft. So maybe he goes somewhere else other than Maryland. I understand there were some injuries at Maryland. He was productive when he was on the field, but I just think him going to Maryland helped cause him to fall to being a 5th round pick. Next guy, another receiver, Amon-Ra St. Brown, the number 11 overall player, goes to USC. He's from California. He stays home. We understand it. But Amon-Ra St. Brown, being a 5th or a 6th round pick, Totally criminal. Absolutely criminal. If this kid goes to Ohio State or Alabama, at minimum, he's a second-round pick. This was my number one sleeper in fantasy football because I remembered him as a recruit. And last year, late in the season, Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to prove, he proved it as a rookie, and he's going to continue to prove it. Unbelievable steal for the Detroit Lions late in the draft last year. He's going to be one of the best slot receivers in all of the NFL in 2 or 3 years. He's an absolute stud. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, he goes to USC. It's not like they had horrible quarterback play. I think the pandemic also, contributed to a lot of these guys not being accurately ranked. Like I was saying with Marvin Wilson, I think Amon-Ra would have gone higher without it. But either way, you would have liked to have chosen a school with a little bit less quarterback influx. Go to a team like Ohio State or Alabama. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown's a late first, early second round pick very easily. And then when it comes to a few players in basketball, Charles Bassey, the number 6 overall player from the state of Kentucky. I believe that was the class of 2018 maybe, Charles Bassey. He goes to Western Kentucky. I believe Mitchell Robinson did this too, and he is known as a bust. The one thing I will say, when you see an undersized center that's like a 5-star, to me, the undersized centers have massive bust potentials. Like Charles Bassey, 6'10", 220, that is not a good build. If I am a recruiting analyst and I'm doing college basketball recruiting rankings, and I see a guy that's 6'10", that can't shoot very well and doesn't move great, there is no way he's going to be a 5-star. Isaiah Stewart is very similar. 6'9", 245 center from Indiana, ends up going to Washington from the state of Indiana. Very interesting. But I just think going to Washington, not a good idea. Jaden Hardy goes pro. I think this kid might have actually reclassified to the class of 2021, but he's looking at being like a late first-round pick. Going pro, going the professional route, sometimes it works. It worked for Jalen Green. It worked for LaMelo. But some other times it just blows up in your face, and it blew up in this kid's face. And then Patrick Baldwin Jr. goes to the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, which I believe is a Horizon League team. His dad was like the coach there, but this decision blew up in this kid's face. He was injured. Apparently, he's in the transfer portal. I don't know if he's decided on where he's transferring, but the number 8 overall player in the most recent class, I think the class of 2021, is transferring to another school after kind of going to Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I believe this kid was going to go to Duke originally until he wanted to follow his dad and go to a Horizon League school. Not the best decision there. But guys, those are just some players that I think, unfortunately, did choose the wrong school. Again, a lot goes into these decisions. It's not just about their NFL future. They want to go to the place they feel most comfortable. And a lot of these, situations are guys like staying home at UCLA, at USC. And it's just not the best decision in terms of their NFL development. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Darnay Holmes, Jaelan Phillips. Jaelan Phillips should have been a top 10 pick. I mean, with his overall just athleticism, it's pretty crazy. But guys, that is going to do it for this edition of Recruiting Throwback. Make sure you follow me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.